With Shadow of the Erdtree coming out soon, it is now more important than ever to go over the strongest builds ever made in the base game of Elden Ring. Whether it's to have a great build going to enter said DLC, or if you just need a good overview of a lot of insanely overpowered builds that are also very fun that can be made with the weapons and spells of the main game. The rules for this video are simple. I will go over a bunch of powerful and fun builds and playstyles in quick succession, and then after you've watched the video, you can check the description out for all the details, nuances and everything you need to know to make the builds you like the most yourself, and try them out in game, and then destroy the world of Elden Ring. Easy, right? Well, let's start. Give the video a like, subscribe, because we're nearing the DLC. Hype, yes, let's go. First of all, we're starting with the Frenzied Lord. A very powerful playstyle revolving around the madness related spells and weapons of the game. Vyke's War Spear, the game's token madness weapon, is really good and comes with great reach and a nice bursty Ash of War. But that's especially so if you utilize its secret explosive power, which can give you an insane boost to your damage just with positioning correctly. And then the madness spells all have their utility too, from say ranged destruction with Frenzied Burst, to grabbing onto your enemies to turn them to the dark side with Inescapable Frenzy, and killing the most powerful bosses like it's nothing with Unendurable Frenzy that can 100 to 0 bosses real quick. Not to mention that the themes of this build are incredible, and it's also tied to one of the main endings of the game. But while the Frenzied Lord relies mostly on the Frenzied Flame, the Blades of Chaos relies on other types of flames, like the Black Flame and regular fire. This powerful fighter has its name thanks to the chaotic insanity that it forces upon any battlefield that it enters. Another build that is very powerful with a powerful level that is easily over 9000. This evil entity uses Black Flame Tornado to easily destroy a lot of the late game bosses like it's nothing. The damage stacking cumulatively is insanely deadly, but he does so while utilizing powerful saw blades that have bleed incorporated, and in the earlier parts of the game makes quick work of bosses too with skillfully using these saw blades. And if that is not enough, this powerful entity has mastered a catalog of powerful pyromancy related spells that support his weapons very well, and with that bring the build truly to the next level with its insane explosive power. This explosive power is equally insane as the explosive power of she that must not be named, the Darkmoon Slayer. No way a most powerful build list can truly exist without having the Darkmoon Greatsword and its infamous owner in it, right? The Darkmoon Greatsword is an insanely overpowered weapon that can trivialize any fight in the game really, from a distance, up close, or wherever you decide to use this weapon. The weapon comes with Frostbite and procs that quickly, does insane damage, and stance breaks any enemy faster than you can count to 3. Well, it has to, because it's also tied to a very important quest. And then you can supplement this intelligence-based weapon with powerful spells too, like the Darkmoon Slayer does with various iconic spells. And with that, take something that's already overpowered to an even more overpowered level, if something like that's even possible. Before we proceed to the next build, I have a question. What would happen if you would nuke a vape? Well, you might want to find out after trying out Fume. Fume is not a vape, it's an award-winning flavored air device and a leader in this category. And what that really means is that it draws flavor to your mouth, filling the void of ditching a bad habit. The flavored air category is also becoming a leading alternative to vaping and smoking. It is not addictive, has no vapor, so you can use it everywhere, no batteries, and it has non-toxic flavors. It is also safe as Fume continuously invests in third-party studies and is in fact backed by doctors in the USA. In person, I found this look to be really cool and well designed. The flavor tasted nice, and even fidgeting with it felt nice. If you're the type of person with a lot of anxiety, then just fidgeting with it can already calm you down perhaps. Fume has served over 300,000 customers, and you can be the next success story. For a limited time, use my code as it's appearing on screen to get your free Fume base when you order the Journey Pack. It is the all-new magnetic stand for your Fume device. Head to tryfume.com, that's tryfum.com, and use my code or scan the QR code on screen to get your free Fume base when you order your Journey Pack today. What's also iconic is the Shadow Hunter build, originally dubbed as the most broken build of all time because it's really without a doubt a contender for said title. It can trivialize any boss really, even if you don't have a brain, because the Shadow Hunter is the master of utilizing clones to do his dirty work, in which he steers these clones to do outrageous damage to anyone he considers to be an enemy. Phantom Slash is the name of this skill, tied to his powerful weapon, of which, by the way, this weapon is insanely good, and Ash of War is a chainable skill that has really amazing tracking too. So all of that gives you insane stickiness to your targets, while obviously dealing a lot of damage. You can then also buff your weapon to apply status effects with your weapon, and since you're part of the attack too, not only your clones, it builds up very fast. Equally fast as how SpongeBob destroys bosses quickly and does insane damage with its golden bubbles. The Envoy's Longhorn is one of the strongest strongest weapons in the game, and you can do absolutely mind-boggling damage with just the raw power of this weapon. And not just that, it comes with insane poise damage too, which means it stance breaks every threat very quickly. Very quickly. SpongeBob then supplements this insane weapon with powerful sorceries because, as you know, he's a waterbender too, and thus by extension a bloodbender as well. While the Envoy's Longhorn is mostly used in a close to mid range, using blood sorceries he can annihilate anyone from an insane distance, as you can see these sorceries as a precision missile, and using water he can set up preemptive nukes to do absolutely disgusting damage. The combination of the various elements makes this one of the most comprehensive and strongest builds of all time, and when we hear comprehensive and strong, we have to include the Blasphemous Blade. The Demon Paladin is easily the strongest rendition of a Blasphemous Blade user and build. The Blasphemous Blade needs no introduction, you know about it. It's an unholy weapon with a destructive ranged Ash of War that deals absolutely amazing damage, but due to the fact that it heals you while dealing damage, well, let's say it's a favorite for many. The Demon Paladin then truly takes the weapon to a next level, since the weapon relies on you investing in faith and thus opening the possibilities for using incantations. This is where the Demon Paladin starts using crucible incantations as well as ancient lightning to deal absolutely nuclear and disgusting damage with spells like Ancient Dragon's Lightning Strike that can just one-shot enemies, as well as other lightning spells. As you see, we make creative use of various elemental damages, and mingling in said various elemental damages means that there's not a single scenario where you are prone to elemental resistances, making the Demon Paladin an absolute S+ tier pick. A S+ tier pick like the Nightblade. The Nightblade is an astronomically powerful build that feels like cheating. It uses one of the most powerful weapons in the game, Wing of Estelle, that can annihilate everything in its arc of destruction, while like with the SpongeBob build, dealing absolutely amazing poise damage to stance break your enemies quickly. The Nightblade is also a Spellblade type of fighter, meaning he utilizes various conjuring related sorceries to destroy everything with big blue blades as well, which are handy for certain use cases, but he is also tied to Celian sorceries, where you used to learn Night sorceries, and this is where the build just becomes practically invincible, because Night Comet cannot be dodged. I repeat, it cannot be dodged, and optimizing for it is practically the same as optimizing for Wing of Estelle, which culminates into a build so powerful. Since the two synergize very well together, well, it's ridiculous. But on the topic of ridiculous, we have to talk about Carian Knights. And not just a Carian Knight, no, the strongest Carian Knight of all time. Remember the video I made? Well, the Carian Knight is like the Nightblade, also a Spellblade type of build, but he specializes in the Carian way, Carian Ashes of Wars, Carian sorceries, and practically everything related to the enchanted knights that once served the Carian royal family. This allows him to do absolute insane damage with sorceries like Carian Slicer, which is a sorcery that comes out ridiculously fast, but at the same time does so much damage it feels amazing to use. Then we have Carian Grandeur for the amazing big burst damage, Magic Glint Blade for the preemptive nukings, big conjured blades with frostbite that can tackle on many foes as well, and also insane stance breaking capabilities yet again to utilize those juicy Carian critical hits. Can even start parrying as well if you like that, and all of that doesn't even scratch the surface yet. You'll have to check the full video because it does show you the insane versatility and power of this knight. And while Carian Knights are insanely versatile, a different type of knight, the Death Knight, kills off his enemies in an insanely brutal and torturous way, let's say, using two quality weapons that combine extremely well together. Back in the day, the Falling Star Beastjaw weapon used to be considered by many to be the strongest PvE weapon in the game, as it could annihilate everything from across the map without you having to break a sweat essentially. These days it's an excellent melee weapon, but it's also still an amazing artillery option, now that it's more balanced, but we have to make the build broken, so we combine it with Giza's Wheel. Both weapons optimized through the exact same setup, giving you an insane quality build where Falling Star Beastjaw allows you to kill off everything in the distance or start building up damage and poise damage, while Giza's Wheel cuts up everything in melee range and builds up Bloodlust as well. So as you can hear, the two complement each other very well, and since it's a power stancing setup, you can hit everything with the insanely hard-hitting power stance moveset as well, or jump attacks, and trust me, not a lot will survive. Enemies that survive is also not a thing in the world of the Godslayer Shaolin monk, with a powerful weapon by his side that was somehow obtained very early on in his adventure using very interesting tactics. If you're interested in that, well, check the video out, I would say. The Godslayer's great sword has an amazing swing, amazing damage, and also is quite light even for a colossal sword, unironically, giving you some fun flexibility in combat. But where it shines truly is obviously its Ash of War that can melt any target in seconds, and comes with black flames as well that will continue to sap HP even after after you have hit your targets. Your enemy thinks you're done? No, you keep building up that damage. And this monk then also has a bunch of spells that it knows in its catalog to supplement his very powerful sword. Can anyone stop the Godslayer? It's all in the name really. What's not so obvious however is the captain's usage of weapons. He makes his two very interesting weapons that when combined lead to quite possibly the strongest strength build of all time. How? Well, he abuses the piercing damage mechanic of Elden Ring, which means you get bonuses to your damage output if you attack when your enemy is attacking you, so at the same time, but does so in a way by not having to actually pay attention to this mechanic, as the captain makes good use of Ashes of Wars and attacks that let you brute force kill your enemies quickly. Pair that with the absolutely insane sustain of the captain, since he is one of the tankiest fighters alive, and you have a recipe for success. What all of that pretty much means is that when you play this build, you will destroy everything without having to dodge, or really without having to pay attention to what your enemy is doing. Don't believe me? Just try it out, read the comments, and you do so as a pirate. Do I need to say more? Maybe we just have to shift the topic and talk about something else very powerful, the Plague Doctor. Plague Doctors never truly had a good reputation. In fact, they couldn't even let their own patients survive for a long time, let alone those that they don't like. The Plague Doctor makes use of his iconic weapon, the Deathspoker, which has amazing bursty damage that can tackle early, mid and late game bosses like it's nothing. The Deathspoker is a very powerful weapon that has amazing burst in close range and has various ways of utilizing its Ash of War, depending on which button you press and what you need for a certain scenario. While the Deathspoker seemingly has terrible scaling with intelligence, if you look at its description, its Ash of War scales very well till around 50 intelligence. This then means that the best build for this weapon will in fact be in an Int Faith build, as its relatively low int requirement to get a lot of power going is excellent to mingle with the buffs obtained by Faith, as well as giving you all the Faith incantations, all the intelligence sorceries and Int Faith sorceries and incantations in the game. Int Faith is great for this weapon because now you can combine the melee and close ranged based Deathspoker with all the big burst incantations, but also incantations that can traverse a lot of distance, complementing the build very well, but also making it one of the few builds where you can in fact utilize the Int Faith Death sorceries and the Golden Order incantations. And it's also rumored that the Shadow of the Erdtree is going to feature various Int Faith weapons and spells, so making my Plague Doctor a perfect S+ tier pick to play and prepare for said DLC. Another perfect choice to play with is none other than the Dragon Cult Flash, a superhero for many that they grew up watching. This superhero is easily the strongest lightning related build of all time, using the legendary Bolt of Grand Sax to snipe everything from an insane distance, gives you so much power in battle, it trivializes many fights. Then this guy also makes use of the Dragon King's Crackblade in conjunction because these two weapons pair up perfectly. This is the other amazing lightning weapon of the game that you can use to close the gap as well as stance break enemies quite easily, since it has a bunch of poise damage ingrained. And to top it off, the Dragon Cult Flash is built in such a way that it also allows you to use the lightning incantations, like the huge bursty melee lightning incantations, but also the one-shot lightning incantations, supplementing your build very well. If you would visualize the battlefield from above, you can see how insane the reach is of this powerful monster. You really don't want to sleep on the Flash. Just like you don't want to sleep on the God of Destruction, which has an advanced form of echolocation like a beluga whale, granting him the powers to obtain insanely powerful weapons at the start of the game. The Rune's Greatsword has some of the best visuals of any weapon in the game. Look at this, it's stunning. But it's not just looks, the power of this weapon in combat is absolutely unrivaled. It can trivialize any fight really, with its insane reach as well as just amazing hyper armor, because fun fact, using the Rune's Greatsword in melee range results in more damage than from a distance, giving you a bunch of options here. But the God of Destruction, as skilled as he is, knew that, so he is built in a way that makes him amazingly tanky, giving him so much sustain so he can always trade hits and not worry about dying really. But also his alter ego, the inverted God of Destruction, finalizes the build, as this alter ego uses the Star Scourge Greatsword, which can nuke everything in a more circular pattern. Again, an Ash of War with amazing hyper armor, allowing him to trade with enemies extremely well, almost as if there is no trading in the first place. The power of this weapon combines very well with the Rune's Greatsword, as one is circular and close range, while the other is linear and long range, and both optimized through the same stats, making this build an amazing rendition on how to use the gravity themed weapons of the game to perfection. Perfection like how the Shapeshifter can become anything he wants at any time, having the ability to grow parts onto his body to give him additional powers. And then he uses probably one of the most underrated and least talked about weapons of all time in Elden Ring, the Magma Worm's Scale Sword, which is really weird to be honest, since the damage of this thing goes nuclear, and does so yet again in style as well. So why did everyone sleep on this weapon exactly? It is a mystery, but optimizing for this weapon means you optimize for a bunch of incantations as well. Want to use Dragon Breaths to absolutely annihilate enemies and give the build extra range? Good news, it's part of the build. Want to use all kinds of glorious new body parts to annihilate enemies? You can yet again do so. The Shapeshifter can kill off his enemies in so many ways, as illustrated in this video, giving the build such insane versatility. Another build with equal versatility but through a completely different stat distribution has to be the Grim Reaper. In his student years, he was banned from the Raya Lucaria Academy for abusing his powers and being driven by the pursuit of power and power only. Afterwards, he murdered all of his ex-colleagues to get back at them for getting banned. The Grim Reaper makes use of blood and frostbite imbued sights, proccing both status effects at the same time on his enemies, and since sights are iconic for this powerful fighter, that means good reach, great utility, and amazing damage. He uses very flashy skills with these sights to get damage in quickly in a way that makes his stream of damage continuous and really giving his enemies no chance in combat, on top of the regular moveset of these weapons of course. But then, since the intelligence of this Grim Reaper is very high, he uses a bunch of sorceries too in conjunction, most of the ones related to being a battle mage. Yes, the Grim Reaper went the route of Haima, blowing up entire hordes of enemies in one go? Done. Using big boing sorceries to quickly stance break enemies? Done. And much more. He has it all really. Just like how a samurai can have it all really too with deadly pointy katanas. Now you can make a very powerful samurai moments away from when you start a new playthrough, as I showed you in my video, and annihilate the entire world. Samurais are known for their Bushido code and discipline, so it's only natural to let that transfer over to Elden Ring. You do so by using the Nagakiba and the Uchi-katana at the same time. This will give you a very lethal dual katana setup that can bleed out all your enemies, and with the Nagakiba's absolute amazing range and the beautiful solo or power send katana moveset, you get access to both with my build and trivialize any enemy really. Add some powerful Ashes of Wars on it too, like this samurai does, to bleed out your enemies from a distance, or bleed them out right in their face in a more flexible and stylistic way, and you're good to go. No one can go truly wrong as a samurai, and especially not as the strongest samurai of all time. But what about the strongest holy paladin of all time? Great Stars is a great weapon with amazing damage and comes with bloodless buildup, and it also heals you with every single hit in fact, and it also allows a bunch of amazing Ashes of Wars. One of those is Prayerful Strike. You can go out of your way to set this up at the start of the game and make a paladin that is literally invincible, as you can tank all the enemy's hits while dealing ridiculous damage. It's what I showed in my original paladin video, but with ties to the lightning school and the aspects of the crucible school, this paladin sets up a bunch of amazing combos where it can use the crucible incantations to close the distance for instance and build up poise damage at the same time, to set up for an amazing critical hit with Great Stars or into a beautifully struck Prayerful Strike. The different components of this build flow very well together. And then you have the lightning spells as well to absolutely nuke your enemies from a distance like a true paladin, even erasing the existence of your enemies from above, because no one can truly escape their judgment. But getting judged is something that the Death Mage does not really care about. Mingling with the spirits of those that have ceased to exist is a type of sorcery that is frowned upon. These type of sorceries exert amazing pressures on your enemies though. The Death Mage possesses a legendary weapon as well, the Sword of Night and Flame, in which he quickly takes care of his enemies with. This weapon is very powerful in the right hands and can be obtained extremely early on, hence why you make the Death Mage as fast as possible. This build has then also two components for its Ashes of War, making it a pretty unique weapon as well. The Blue Beam of Death that does amazing single target damage, and the Burst of Flames when you want that AoE damage. And you can complement that with any sorcery or incantation that you like, on top of the Death sorceries, because this is another int Fate build, as the Sword of Night and Flame scales its damage with both. And if you remember everything I said when we were talking about the Plague Doctor, well, this applies here as well. In fact, the Plague Doctor and the Death Mage mix very well for a playthrough. What also works very well for a playthrough is playing as the Cold-Blooded Flame, the one and only that has mastered the usage of twin blades to an exceptional degree, including the only real unique twin blade of the game, Eleonora's Pull Blade. Eleonora's Pull Blade has an amazing Ash of War. It is very elegant and you can even call it artistic, but more importantly, it does amazing damage too. And yes, it procs bloodlust on your enemies while you're doing a little dance on top of them. All of that already makes it an absolute amazing weapon to use, but the Cold-Blooded Flame takes his twin blades to a whole new level however, as he power senses two twin blades, the just mentioned twin blade and a cold imbued twin blade to generate frostbite buildup. See, Eleonora's Pull Blade has ingrained fire damage, so it keeps resetting your frostbite procs, meaning you will have continuous frostbite procs and associated burst damage and bloodlust procs in addition to the amazing physical and fire damage. Now the cold imbued twin blade has Ice Spear on it as well to make things even more broken. Ice Spear is easily one of the strongest Ashes of Wars in the game. It can melt enemies from a distance and build up frostbite too, and it makes you have a ranged component, finalizing this build, which you can make at the start. Remember the name, the Cold-Blooded Flame. Remember when I made my iconic Mage series, a trilogy of videos for an actual Mage build, and when I say actual, I mean no weapons, just pure sorceries, and it works extremely well. In the trilogy I go over many sorceries while running a dual staff setup, and the videos show you how to destroy every phase of the game, early, mid and late game, from Rock Sling to have a nice ranged stance breaking tool, to Carian Slicer to annihilate things in melee space, to the Loretta sorceries to snipe your targets, to Comet Azure to one-shot enemies, to Meteorite of Astal to control the world, to Stars of Rune to meticulously track and destroy enemies. There's a lot to a dual staff Mage setup, especially if you build a nice catalog of sorceries that allow you to tackle all the different scenarios of the game, and I would recommend you to watch my trilogy if you're into that playstyle. And for those that remember, these were my first Elden Ring builds on my channel and still tell you everything you need to know about the Mage way, so that makes them quite special too. And while going sorceries and sorceries only is very powerful, some species solely rely on the weapons of their kind. This mysterious weird alien comes from a place far away, far away, but he has found its way to this realm. His kind's drip is immaculate, but even better is the weapon that this entity wields, probably one of the most underrated weapons of all time, which boggles the mind since it's incredibly overpowered, with a great range too, so you can melt enemies from a distance too, and it also has that ingrained stagger which makes bosses like Malenia look like a complete joke. The Death Ritual Spear looks kinda weird. This is because it has some unique communicative alien-esque skills aside from it being a destructive force, but one thing is certain, do not mess with this alien and his kind. What you also don't want to mess with is anyone that uses the Greatsword. Yes, the Greatsword, the Guts Greatsword, an iconic build yet again on my channel, where we make a pure strength build right at the start of the game, and we model our build after no one than Guts himself, Mr. I have a huge sword and I want to destroy everything in my path. You can make an absolutely broken strength build right away after pressing the new game button, and with great Ash of War options to smash your enemy's face right into the ground. Then we also obtain the absolute best gear that you can get very early on, but make sure we don't fall in the heavy load category, to make you insanely tanky, so you can tank many hits and also resist stance breaking hits and still have great mobility while using your enormous sword. Sustain, damage, epicness, you have it all with this build, just like you have it all with the Dragonlord Bleed build, another iconic build on my channel where we make an absolute busted Dragonlord build that can use the Dragon Breaths and destroy everything in its path at the start of the game. Annihilate your enemies with the Fire Breath, you got it. Apply Scarlet Rot and let it eat your enemies inside out, that way for an easy kill, covered. Apply the Frost and Magic based breath for some insane next level damage, you got it. And then we have the physical dragon incantations as well to slap everything that dares to near us, but then also mix with some other cool incantations from other schools like Lightning, the Black Flame school and the Frenzied Flame school to really top off the build. However, we complete the build because we pick the Redufia for our other hand, as we have two hands, yeah, obviously, which is a very powerful weapon that allows you to proc Bloodlust from a distance and supplement the build to make it have a bleed component as well, which then truly takes this build and my idea of it to a next level. Now that's the build that I showed you in regards to how to make it at the start of the game, but you can add even more incantations and become the Lord of Incantations late game. You by then have unlocked Smaragd's Glintstone Breath, which is the upgraded version of the earlier mentioned breath, which does very nasty damage, and especially if you combine it with Borealis Mist. Borealis Mist is another Dragon Breath type of spell that deals magic damage, but this one procs Frostbite as well, giving an initial spike of burst damage and applies a debuff at the same time, which you then can chain that into an even stronger version of the Smaragd's Glintstone Breath for, yeah, absolute nuclear damage. Now you can supplement yet again an all-round build like this with things like Pest Rats to annihilate big bosses, Swarm of Flies to give some amazing pressure in combat, and also things like Grail's Roar to apply another debuff as well and do some great AoE damage in a circular pattern. Those are just a few examples. The video goes in depth about all the options, so check that out. And we still also have our bleed options here to use for our other hand. The Redufia stays amazing till the end of the game really, so it's a very safe option option, but you'll have multiple options here as you see on screen to supplement this build and my idea for it, and it will be completely fitting with the arcane in us. But something else, while we're mentioning bleed, what happened to the bleed seppuku jump attack build? I made a video about that too. It is one of Elden Ring's most known builds. You use curved swords or twin blades, depending on what weapon type you prefer, it really doesn't matter, it's all going to be good, and you just melt everything by using your power stance moveset. The jump attacks in particular are especially destructive, as with the two mentioned weapon types, you hit enemies multiple times with just a single jump attack. The damage gets nuts as you see on screen. The best option for this type of build from an opportunity cost and efficiency perspective is no doubt going to be the dual scavengers or one scavenger and one bandit setup that I went over in the video, because you can get it insanely early and get the build going through scaling your blood loss and damage through a single stat with the innate blood loss that the scavenger's curved sword has, and by the early level 100s or even lower than that already have cleared the entire game like that due to the extremely efficient scaling of these curved swords. What's also extremely efficient is how quickly this mystic warrior takes care of his enemies. He has pretty much never lost a battle. Now, going pure dexterity in Elden Ring makes you able to get absolute insane attack rating on a weapon called the Guardian Sword Spear. It's considered to be the strongest dexterity weapon in the game just based on that alone, but you can in fact farm 2 of these and get a power stance setup going, and with mystic ties to the Guardians of the Erdtree, your sword spears will also get blessed with lightning, giving you extra attack rating and making you destroy everything in even more style. These Guardian Sword Spears are halberds and thus have a very diverse moveset, and it also allows you to put a plethora of different Ashes of Wars on these swords. Sword Dance is for example a really good option here, as you can do some absolutely insane damage with that Ash of War and have good hyper armor while doing it, and all of that insanity can be done at the start of the game too for our pure dexterity lovers. We have to talk about another underrated weapon, the Glintstone Kris. The Glintstone Kris is a dagger that is very underrated, but it's also an absolute monster pick. It is a pocket nuke with its initial burst that can deal a lot of damage from a distance, but then it also has a follow-up in which you can stab your enemies with such ferocity for even more damage. King Cobra is a specialist in this weapon, and that's due to its affinity with snakes. See, King Cobra is the master of snakes, and he uses snakes to destroy all his enemies. The dagger looks like a snake for a reason, but King Cobra utilizes living snakes too. There's even one on his shield, for example. With this snake, he applies deadly poison on his enemies from quite a good distance, which gives him all kinds of buffs, enhancing his damage output even more, and at the same time the poison is doing its thing. The combination of the huge burst and the deadly poison taking away your enemy's HP, well, let's say no one is really a match for King Cobra. Just like a Pyromancer can lit up the world instantly, like a match you can say, this perfected Fire Mage uses all the fire spells of the game to annihilate the world through set fire spells. From Catch Flame to do great melee damage, to the big boy spells like Burn of Flame that can completely annihilate the strongest bosses in the game like it's nothing, to the big boy Fireball Giant's Flame Take D spell that can be utilized to nuke enemies from a distance, or Flame Fall upon them to split its damage and hit multiple targets at the same time. There's a lot of options here when going the route of a Pyromancer, and this Pyromancer is also tied to the Black Flame spells, giving him even more possibilities in combat for a rather good all-round build. While Pyromancy is these days considered to be an incantation school, it used to be a class of spells on its own in the earlier Souls games. So for something iconic like that, we had to create the most powerful build for it. Iconic like the Nightmare. How have we not mentioned the Nightmare yet, one might ask, when it's so popular? Well, time to rectify that. The Nightmare is the arch nemesis of Malenia. A build so powerful it trivializes Malenia completely in phase 1 and 2, consistently back to back in a very streamlined way. My video about it has the tactic that I made spelled out for you to do that, but the build doesn't just trivialize the strongest boss in the game, Malenia. No, it trivializes every single boss in the game. How, do you ask? Well, the Nightmare is based on Pyramid Head. That means it uses the Butchering Knife to do all its work, which has a property that heals the Nightmare every single time he hits something with his weapon. Then we combine it with an Ash of War that makes you hit your enemy a lot of times in quick succession, like Prelet's Charge, and that way you will get insane sustain. Then we optimize the build even more and coat our weapon in say Blood Flame, which allows us to trivialize any boss in the game really, as we will be able to deal great damage, heal while doing so, and trigger blood loss on our enemies very quickly over and over, since we hit our enemies so often in quick succession. And let's just say the Nightmare is really a nightmare. A nightmare like the evil spirit that haunts you in your sleep, in your home, everywhere. The evil spirit is a vengeful woman that was wronged in her life, and now she's out there to take revenge on everyone, but she does so by jump scaring them first and then getting rid of them quickly. The evil spirit might seem simplistic in nature, as it only uses a small weapon, the Katar, but the Katar is so underrated and powerful that it can destroy any boss utilizing its power stance regular attacks or jump attacks that get modified by the piercing damage property that I talked about earlier, and it gets this property since it does have a pointy end, and with this you can really spiral its damage out of control. And since the Katar is a very lightweighted fist weapon, the attacks come out very quickly, and with the amazing mobility of the evil spirit, since she's a ghost that can go from A to B pretty much instantly, you can really do a lot of damage quickly over and over, resulting in swift kills of bosses. The evil spirit operates like an assassin because she wants to take revenge as quick as possible on as many enemies as possible. A bit like the artist. The artist is also an assassin and a fan favorite, with its own cult following even, but the artist operates in a completely different way. See, the artist colors the battlefield in such a way that it will start to resemble a color palette. Yes, it's because he's mixing every imaginable status effect and applying all of them on its enemies at the same time. Is that even possible, I hear you asking? Yes, with this insane build in particular, you can do so. Bleed, frostbite, poison, scarlet rot, you name it, and do so insanely fast, utilizing very specific rapiers, which have a very quick, elegant moveset but are very strong. The artist is the master of these rapiers. He has figured them out to a T and how to hit his enemies' vulnerable points. What he also makes sure is that his enemies are always going to be internally annihilated after getting ridden with status effects. Annihilation is the second name of the Samurai Mage, which is another play on a samurai build, but this time utilizing the popular Moonveil. Yes, you didn't think I would forget about the Moonveil, right? The Moonveil has very quick damage through its Ash of War, and since it's an intelligence-based katana, we can use sorceries with it. We use a bunch of sorceries with the Samurai Mage, making it a very powerful Spellblade Mage type of build, and then we also utilize another katana to grant us a dual katana intelligence-based build as well, at the same time unlocking power stancing for us. We have so many options with this build, from casting spells to using our katanas. And then we place Carian Ranger on our other katana, so we have a perfect mix of the quick, swift Ash of War of the Moonveil and the big burst of Carian Ranger. With Carian Ranger we also have multiple phases, so we can quickly adapt mid-combat too, and all of that makes us a very good build and mix of various elements. And the best thing is, everything you just saw can be made at the start of the game, like a typical Bloodhound's Fang build. Surely I cannot omit the Bloodhound Fang on a list like this, right? It is easily the strongest weapon you can obtain in Limgrave, and it sticks with you for your entire playthrough really, destroying everything, bleeding out everything, having this insane slick Ash of War that allows you to dodge a lot while dealing damage. A very good moveset. I can go on and on. It's an amazing strength and dexterity weapon, and if you want to make a build around those types of stats, this build was just made for you. We make it even stronger as we imbue it with Blood Flame, making us bleed our enemies really quickly, and then we also use a shield to give us some insane tankiness as the Vagabond. Overall, a really good build that needs to be on the list, and it would anger a lot of people if it wasn't. Just like a Big Boink or Unga Bunga build needs to be on this list, utilizing two of the most powerful colossal weapons in the game at the same time. This will make you weigh a lot, yes, but thankfully there are ways to circumvent that, and this build does exactly that. What it then also does is smash your enemy's face into the ground, no questions asked. It's the ultimate, I want to just boink everything and win. And the two weapons that we use, the Giant's Crusher and the Prelet's Inferno Crosia, get the highest attack rating out of all the weapons in the game, pretty much when going strength. So yeah, the build doesn't need a lot of introduction, it doesn't need a hype man, the footage speaks for itself, and what you can exactly expect if you decide to go this route. Let's just say you will obliterate everything. But another route we can go is the route of being an actual juggernaut tank, which I have a build for too. This build utilizes the fingerprint shield and makes you pretty much invincible, since afterwards nothing can hit you anymore, and while nothing can hit you, you have two options. Actually use your shield as a weapon with great results, because the shield gets a high attack rating for a shield, but more importantly can be infused with say bleed to make your enemies bleed out and quickly annihilate in that way. Or you can just use your shield as an actual shield and then just poke them from behind with weapons that allow you to do so, like the Raging Tank does, and destroy your enemies like that. Especially very useful when you use a quick weapon that can, for example, also bleed your enemies out. And in the meantime, your enemies cannot touch you at all. The build is a 2-in-1 type of shield build. Both ways will allow you to annihilate your enemies. Hey look, it's the Black Flame Rogue, and he's making its appearance, dubbed as the most lethal assassin of all time that utilizes daggers. He uses the Black Knife to assassinate enemies from a distance with elegance. The Ash of War of this weapon can melt everything quickly, but especially big HP targets, as it has that HP sap mechanic like Black Flame spells have, for example. That is based on a percentage, and for the close-up close-up situations, this guy specializes in critting everything because the Black Flame Rogue uses a lot of stance breaking too. You can read the pinned comment on the video on how to easily stance break enemies that way. Back in the day, it used to be through Flames of the Red Mains, but post-nerf, the best way to stance break enemies quickly is going to be through the Glintblade Phalanx Ash of War. Good news here is that this Ash of War is obtainable easily early on too and can be put on a dagger as well. Then we use the Misery Cord, which has the highest stance breaking modifier in the game to dish out amazing damage when we critically hit our enemies. Both of our weapons are daggers, so we can power sense them as well. And then the Black Flame Rogue isn't just an ordinary rogue, no, he's also tied to Destined Death and the Black Flame School of Incantations, granting him the possibility to use all kinds of cool Black Flame and Destined Death spells, which in turn finalizes his catalog of potential actions to take on the battlefield and sets up for a lot of dangerous combos, making this guy a very powerful fighter. And while the Black Flame Rogue is definitely powerful, we have to talk about the Punisher as well, the Master of Whips. Whips are kinda unorthodox to use in Elden Ring and not as popular to use as other options, but that doesn't say much about their power. They have gotten buffed many times in the past 2 years, making them a very good option, and who better to utilize these whips through than the Punisher. The Punisher utilizes a variety of whips depending on where he's at in his adventure. Early on, he uses powerful options like the Urumi, which has a very cool unique attack, and also combines his whips where he starts to make great use of power sensing whips that allows him to freeze his enemies and give him great power there as well. Later on, he utilizes great mobility and momentum paired with powerful bleed whips known as the Hoslow Petal Whips. With these razor sharp chain link blades, he can make his enemies bleed from a distance, as whips have quite some reach to them, supplemented with an Ash of War that makes him hit enemies from a very large distance. Conclusion: devastation is inflicted on anyone that likes to mess with the Punisher, and we're going to end this video with an all-time classic, the Ranger. If we would confine ourselves to just using the bows of the game, then this Ranger is going to be the strongest rendition of such a type of build. Don't get it twisted, bows require some extra skill to use properly, but with some practice you can become a very nasty archer and bow expert in Elden Ring. The Ranger utilizes various bows and great bows to have an answer to every part of the game, whether it's early, mid or late game. From inflicting deadly poison and sniping your enemies like a true hunter, to blowing up your enemies with magic missiles raining from the sky, to ultimately be a very agile and skilled Ranger that can position and move so smoothly that he can destroy everything from a distance and up close. Then this Ranger also uses a variety of arrows, and only the strongest types of arrows really, to make sure he's always covered in that department too. Have you played Elden Ring too many times and you just don't want to keep using regular weapons or spells and just play the game in a completely different way? Well, then this Ranger is your calling. Thank you for watching. Check the description out to find all the details you need for all the builds you like the idea of the most and everything you need to know to play those builds and completely annihilate everyone in your playthrough. I'm out. Also, don't forget to check out Fume and use my code to get your free Fume base today when you order your Journey pack.